She put the rifle against his chest before he got both feet off the horse. "Don't come any closer. I have nowhere else to go." Cole Bennett looked down the barrel at a woman who weighed about 100 pounds in a coat made for a man twice her size, and he did the one thing she wasn't ready for. He let go of his own rifle, dropped it in the snow. "Ma'am, that's my cabin you're standing in." It was empty. For 11 years. And Clara Whitmore said the thing that stopped him cold. "Then you already knew somebody was living here, and you came alone anyway." Chad, before we go one step further, if you love stories about second chances, buried injustice, and the people who refuse to stay down, take 1 second and hit subscribe. Stay with me all the way to the end, because what this woman is hiding from will change how you see every scene that comes before it. And down in the comments, tell me what city you're watching from tonight. I want to see just how far this story has traveled. Now, let's begin. 2 hours before that, Cole Bennett fired a man for lying to him about smoke. "There's no smoke, boss." "Hank, I can see it from the house." That's fog off the creek. It's the second week of January and it's 9 degrees and there is not one drop of unfrozen water in this county." Cole Bennett didn't raise his voice. He never raised his voice, and every man on that ranch had learned to be afraid of exactly that. "That's a chimney. On the old Bennett place. 11 miles up the north line. And you rode that fence Tuesday, and you told me it was clear." Hank Dooley took his hat off. "Boss, was it clear Tuesday?" Silence. "Hank, was there smoke on Tuesday?" And Hank Dooley said, "Yes, sir." Cole Bennett set down his coffee. "How long?" "Boss?" "How long, Hank?" "Since November," Hank Dooley said. The kitchen went very quiet. Marta, the housekeeper, stopped moving at the sink. 2 months. Cole's voice hadn't changed, and that was the terrible part. "There's been a fire in my grandfather's cabin for 2 months, and you've known, and every week you've ridden that line and come back and told me it was clear." "Boss, listen." "Why?" And Hank Dooley said, "Because it's a woman." Cole Bennett stood up. "What?" "It's a woman, boss." Hank had his hat crushed in both fists. "I seen her in December, hauling wood, and she's Cole. She's not right. She's not squatting to steal cattle. She's not running a still. She's up there dying slow, and you couldn't what?" "I couldn't be the man that put her out in January," Hank Dooley said. "I got a daughter her age." Cole Bennett stood in his own kitchen and looked at a man he'd known 19 years. "Get your coat." "Boss?" "You're not fired. Get your coat. You're coming with me." "Cole." "You've spent 2 months protecting a stranger on my land and lying to my face to do it," Cole Bennett said. "And I want to know why a man like you would risk his whole living on it, and there's exactly one way to find out, and it's up the north line." Marta said from the sink. "Cole?" He stopped. "Take the pistol," she said. "Not the rifle. A rifle in your hands and she'll run. A rifle on your saddle and she'll shoot." Cole Bennett looked at his housekeeper. "How do you know about her?" And Marta said, "Who do you think's been leaving flour on that trail since November, Bibe?" Ahmad. He rode 11 miles and thought about his grandfather the whole way. That was the part nobody knew about Cole Bennett, that the richest cowboy in the county, the man who'd tripled the ranch and bought out 4 neighbors and had his name on the bank, could not ride up the north line without his chest going tight. Because the old cabin was where it started. His grandfather had built it with his own hands in 1911 and lived in it 40 years before there was a big house. Before there was money, before there was anything but a man and a woman and a hard piece of ground. And Cole's wife was buried 400 yards from it. That's why nobody went up there. That's why it had been empty 11 years. And somebody had lit a fire in it. He saw her before she saw him, and he stopped his horse and he watched. She was splitting wood, and she was doing it wrong. She had the stance wrong, and the swing wrong, and she was burning 3 times the strength she needed, and she'd clearly never held an axe until a few months ago, and she was doing it anyway in 9 degrees with her breath coming out of her in clouds, one log after another, because if she stopped, she'd freeze. Hank beside him said quietly, "That's her. How long's she been at that? She does it twice a day, boss. Hour each time." Cole Bennett watched a woman who didn't know how to split wood. Split wood for survival, and something moved in his chest that hadn't moved in 11 years. "Stay here," he said. She heard him at 40 feet, and she had the rifle before he had a word out. That was the thing that stayed with him. She didn't fumble. She didn't panic. She dropped that axe and came up with a rifle from where it had been leaning. She'd set it where she could reach it. She always set it where she could reach it, and she had it on him before he got both boots on the ground. "Don't come any closer. I have nowhere else to go." And Cole Bennett dropped his own rifle in the snow.
Gentleman.
"Ma'am, that's my cabin you're standing in." It was empty. For 11 years. And Clara Whitmore said, "Then you already knew somebody was living here, and you came alone anyway." Cole Bennett stopped. "What? You brought one man, and he's sitting on a horse 40 yards back with his hands where I can see them, and you dropped your rifle before I asked?" Her voice was steady, and that was worse than shaking. "Men who come to put a woman off their land don't do that. So either you're a fool, or you already know something about me, and mister, you don't look like a fool." Cole Bennett said, "What's your name?" "No." "Ma'am, you don't get my name." The rifle didn't move. "A name's the last thing I've got that's mine, and you're not getting it for free. You want me off your land, say so. I'll be gone by dark. But you don't get my name, and you don't get my story, and you don't get to feel good about yourself." "I didn't come to feel good." "Everybody comes to feel good," Clara Whitmore said. "Rich men most of all. You find a woman freezing in a cabin, and you help her, and then you've got a nice thing to think about yourself for the rest of your life, and mister, I am nobody's nice thing." Then Cole Bennett stood in the snow a long moment. "You're right," he said. The rifle stayed up, but something in her face flickered. "What?" "You're right. That's exactly why men help people. I've done it. I built a school in that town so people would say my name in a certain tone. And I paid for the church roof for the same reason, and every dollar of it made me feel like a good man." Cole Bennett looked at her. "So I'm not going to insult you by pretending I'm better than that." Clara Whitmore did not lower the rifle, but she said, "Then why'd you drop your gun?" And Cole Bennett said, "Because my wife is buried 400 yards from where you're standing, and you lit a fire to keep warm, and I couldn't figure out how to point a gun at that." Jack, the rifle came down about 4 inches. "Your wife. Sarah Bennett, 11 years ago." His voice had gone flat the way it did. "This was her favorite place on the whole ranch, my grandfather's cabin. She used to make me ride up here in the summers, and she'd—" He stopped. "That's not your business," he said. "No," Clara Whitmore agreed. "It's not." But the rifle came down the rest of the way. She didn't invite him in. He wouldn't have gone. They stood in that snow 20 feet apart, and it was Hank, finally 40 yards back, who couldn't stand it. "Boss," he called, "she's froze near through. Look at her hands." Cole looked at her hands. They were wrapped in strips of what had been a wool blanket, and there was blood on the wrappings, and Clara Whitmore saw him look and put them behind her back like a child caught stealing. "They're fine." "They're not fine. They're fine." And now for the first time her voice cracked. "They're fine, and I don't need a doctor, and I don't need your money, and I don't need your pity. And if you say one word about a warm bed in that big house, I will pick this rifle back up. Do you understand me?" Cole Bennett said, "I understand you." "Good. I'm not offering you a warm bed." Clara Whitmore blinked. "You're not?" And Cole Bennett said, "I'm offering you a job." That stopped her cold. He watched it stop her. And he understood in that second that he'd found the one thing she couldn't refuse because it was the one thing that wasn't charity. What kind of job? Ma'am? What kind of job? I've got 4,000 acres, Cole Bennett said, and about half of it I haven't laid eyes on in 11 years. There's old trails washed out. There's line cabins falling down. There's fence. I don't know the state of, and creek crossings that have moved, and whole sections of the North Range that nobody's mapped since my grandfather and I've got 20 hands, and not one of them will ride up here. Why not? Because my wife's buried up here, Cole Bennett said, and they're afraid of me. Jepkin. Clara Whitmore stood in the snow. You want me to survey your land? I want you to document it. Damaged ground, bad trails. What's standing, what's fallen, what needs doing. Cole Bennett kept his voice level. It's real work, and it's hard work, and it pays real wages, and ma'am, it's alone work. You'd be up here by yourself most of every day. Nobody hovering, nobody helping, nobody being kind at you. He watched that land. And you already know this ground better than any man I've got, Cole Bennett said, because you've been surviving on it for 2 months. Clara Whitmore said, Why? Ma'am, why? The rifle was down, but her whole body was still a closed door. You don't know me. I could be running from the law. I could be a thief. I could be crazy. Mister, you don't know one single thing about me, and you're offering me a job on your land. Why? And Cole Bennett said, Because you split wood for an hour in 9 degrees rather than ask anybody for help. And I've been looking for a person like that my whole life, and I've never once found one. Chamoy. She didn't answer for a long time. Then she said, I have conditions. All right. I don't sleep in that house. I stay in this cabin. It's mine now. I fixed it. I earned it. Done. I don't take charity. Wages for work, that's all. You leave flour on that trail again, and I'll leave the money for it nailed to your gate. Cole Bennett almost smiled. That was Marta, but done. And her jaw worked. And when spring comes, I leave. First thaw. You don't own my future. You get a winter of work, and then I'm gone, and you don't follow me, and you don't ask where. Cole Bennett said, Why spring? And Clara Whitmore said, Because by spring, he'll have stopped looking. Everything in Cole Bennett went still. She'd said too much. He watched her realize it, watched a woman who'd guarded every word for 2 months let one slip because she was cold and tired, and it was the first conversation she'd had with a human being since November. Nobody, she said. Ma'am, nobody. The door slammed shut again. There's no he. Do we have a deal or not? Cole Bennett looked at her a long moment. He could have pushed. He'd built an empire pushing. He knew exactly how to take that one slipped word and pull on it until the whole thing came apart. And standing in that snow, he made a decision that he would not fully understand for months. He decided not to. We have a deal, he said. Report to Marta for supplies, not the house, the tack shed. Nobody has to see you. And Clara Whitmore said, Why are you making it easy for me to hide? Cole Bennett got back on his horse. Because I spent 11 years hiding in a house with 40 rooms, he said, and nobody ever made it easy for me, and I always wished somebody had. He turned the horse. First thaw, Clara Whitmore said. I'm gone. I heard you the first time. I mean it, Mr. She stopped. I don't know your name. Cole Bennett. Something crossed her face. Fast. Gone. Bennett, she said. You know it. And Clara Whitmore said, Everybody knows it. It's on the bank. But that wasn't why her face had changed, and Cole Bennett was halfway down the mountain before he understood he'd seen it, and by then it was too late to ask. She started work on a Monday, and by Wednesday she'd found something that had been wrong for 9 years. Marta brought word down to the house at supper. The north tank. What about it? The woman says it's dry. Cole Bennett put down his fork. It's not dry. We fill it off the spring line every... She says the spring line's been cracked since the freeze of '73, and you've been running water into the ground for 9 years, and she says there's a wet seam 40 yards downhill where it's been coming out. And Cole... Marta set down the plate. She drew a map. Cole looked at it. It was a good map. It was better than good. It was the map of a person who'd been taught to read land by somebody who knew, and it showed a spring line and a crack and a wet seam, exactly where his own grandfather's notes said the water ran. And Cole Bennett had 20 hands and a foreman, and not one of them had caught it in 9 years. "Who taught you to survey?" he said out loud to an empty kitchen. And 400 yards up a mountain in a cabin, Clara Whitmore was asking herself why she'd been fool enough to draw it that well. So, she'd meant to be useless. That was the plan. She'd sat in that cabin Monday night and told herself, do the work. Take the wages. Be forgettable. Be a woman who documents trails. Don't be good at anything because good is memorable, and memorable is the thing that gets a person found. And then she'd walked out to the north tank and seen the crack in the spring line, and her whole body had done the thing. It used to do the thing from before. Before the widowing, before Victor Hale, before the fake documents and the courthouse and the running. Her hands had come up and her eye had run the line, and she'd known the way she used to know, and she'd drawn it before she could stop herself. Because Clara Whitmore had been a surveyor's daughter and a rancher's wife, and she'd run 400 acres of her own once, and she'd been good. She'd been the best in her county. And that was the whole reason a powerful man had wanted her land. And the whole reason he'd been able to take it. Because nobody believes a woman with dirt under her nails knows more than a man in a suit. She'd drawn the map that well because she'd forgotten for 1 hour to be nobody. She would not make that mistake again. She made it 11 more times before spring. He didn't come back up the mountain for 2 weeks. That was deliberate. Marta had told him, let her be Cole. She's like a dog that's been kicked. You go up there every day and she'll bolt. And so he stayed away, and he read her maps at his own kitchen table every night, and he learned her. He learned her the way you learn a person from their work. He learned she was thorough. He learned she was honest. She flagged problems that would cost him money, and she never once flagged one that wasn't real. He learned she had a temper, because there was a note in the margin of the third map that said, your fence here is a disgrace, and whoever built it should be ashamed. And Cole Bennett had laughed out loud alone in his kitchen for the first time in 11 years, because he'd built that fence. And he learned she was afraid because every single map ended at the ridgeline. She never went past the ridge. 4,000 acres, and she'd mapped 900 of them, and every one was on the near side of the ridge, and Cole Bennett looked at that boundary, night after night, the invisible line she wouldn't cross, and he understood it was because past the ridge, you could see the road. She was staying where the road couldn't see her. 1. He went up on a Thursday because Marta was sick, and somebody had to carry the supplies. That's what he told himself. Clara had the cabin door open before he was off his horse rifle in hand. She always had the rifle, and she saw it was him, and she did not lower it right away. And that told him something too. Marta's sick, he said. It's just me. Leave it on the stump. Ma'am? Leave it on the stump and go, Mr. Bennett, that was the deal. Cole Bennett set the sack on the stump, and then, instead of leaving, he said, who's Victor? The rifle came up, all the way up fast, and her face had gone white, and Cole Bennett stood there with his hands loose at his sides and watched a woman decide whether to shoot him. Where did you hear that name? You didn't say Victor, Cole Bennett said carefully. You said he. Back in January. You said by spring he'll have stopped looking. You never said Victor. Then where? There's a man been in town 3 times since Christmas, Cole Bennett said. Asking questions. Nice coat. Nobody knows him. And he's looking for a woman, and he's got a name for her that isn't Clara, and he's telling people she's sick, ma'am, in the head. He's telling people she ran off from her family and she's not safe to be alone, and there's people worried about her. Clara Whitmore's arms had started to shake. And his name, Cole Bennett said, is Victor Hale. She sat down. Right there in the doorway of that cabin in the cold, she sat down like her legs had quit, and the rifle went across her lap, and she put both wrapped hands over her face. "He's here," she said. "Ma'am?" "He's here." Her voice was coming apart. 3 months. I gave myself 3 months, and it wasn't enough. It's never enough. He's got money, and money doesn't get tired, and I've been up here splitting wood thinking I was safe. You are safe. You don't understand. Then tell me, Cole Bennett said. And Clara Whitmore looked up at him, and the whole story was right there in her face. 3 months of it. A lifetime of it. And Cole Bennett watched her want to say it, and not be able to, because the last time she'd trusted a man with power, he'd taken everything she had. "Why would you help me?" she said. "You don't know me." "I know your maps," Cole Bennett said. "That's not. I know you flag problems that cost me money, and you never once lied to make yourself look good. I know you built a fence better than mine out of scrap. I know you won't cross the ridge because the road can see it, and I know you split wood in the cold rather than ask a soul for help." Cole Bennett crouched down in front of her. Slow the way you'd approach a hurt animal. "I've read you for 2 months, ma'am. I know you better than I know most people I've had dinner with." Clara Whitmore said, "That's not the same as knowing what he did." And Cole Bennett said, "Then tell me what he did." She didn't. Not that day. That day she stood back up and wiped her face and said, "Get off my mountain, Mr. Bennett." And he went because he'd learned that pushing her was the fastest way to lose her. But that night, he didn't read her maps. That night, Cole Bennett sat at his kitchen table with a glass he didn't drink, and thought about a man in a nice coat who came to a town and told everyone a woman was crazy before she could tell them she wasn't. And he thought about how well it would work. How it always worked. You get to a town first and you say, "She's not well, she's not safe, there's people worried." And then whatever she says after that, however true, however desperate, comes out of the mouth of a woman who's already been labeled. And every word she says to defend herself just proves the point. She's agitated. She's paranoid. She thinks people are after her. People were after her. Cole Bennett had built an empire. He knew exactly how power worked, and he knew exactly what he was looking at, and it turned his stomach because he'd used pieces of it himself. Not that, never that, but pieces. And at 2 a.m, he made a phone call to a man in the state capitol who owed him a favor, and he said 4 words that started everything. "Find me Victor Hale." The man called back in 9 days. "Cole, this fella you asked about." "Go ahead. He's clean." Cole Bennett said, "That's not possible." "That's the thing, Cole. That's what I called to tell you. He's too clean. There's a Victor Hale land development, 3 counties, and there's not one lawsuit, not one complaint, not one bad word in any record anywhere. And Cole, nobody's that clean. Nobody in land is that clean. I've been doing this 30 years, and an honest landman's got scratches, and this fella's got none, and that's not innocence." "Then what is it?" And the man said, "That's somebody who makes problems disappear." "That's going." Cole Bennett hung up the phone and stood in his kitchen a long time. Then he got in his truck and drove 11 miles and climbed a mountain in the dark, and Clara Whitmore had the rifle on him before he cleared the tree line. "It's Cole," he called. "It's Cole Bennett. I need to talk to you, and it can't wait for morning. Go home." "He makes people disappear, Clara." The rifle stopped moving. "I had a man look into Victor Hale," Cole Bennett said into the dark. "And there's nothing on him. Not one thing. Not a lawsuit, not a complaint in 3 counties in 15 years of land deals. And ma'am, I've done land deals, and nobody's that clean, which means he's not clean at all, which means he's very, very good at making the people who could hurt him go quiet." The cabin was silent. "And you're one of them," Cole Bennett said. "Aren't you? You're a person who could hurt him. That's what this is. You didn't run because you were scared. You ran because you know something." Clara Whitmore lowered the rifle. She stood in the doorway of that cabin in the dark and the cold, and she said the first true thing she'd said to him. "I have the original deed," she said. Cole Bennett went very still. The land he took from me. My husband's land. My family's land 4 generations. Her voice was shaking. He forged a sale. He had papers that said my husband sold it to him 3 weeks before he died, and I stood in a courtroom and said my husband never sold anything. And Victor Hale's lawyer stood up and said, "Your Honor, the grieving widow is understandably confused, and the judge believed him. Mr. Bennett, because Victor Hale had a suit and a reputation, and I had dirt under my nails and a dead husband. But you have the original." "I have the original deed," Clara Whitmore said. "The real one, with the real chain of title going back to 1898. And it doesn't have his forged sale on it because his forged sale never happened, and it proves everything. And I've been carrying it for 3 months in an oilcloth against my skin because it is the only thing on this earth that can put that man in prison." "Hound," Cole Bennett said. "Then why are you running? Why aren't you fighting?" And Clara Whitmore said, "Because the last person who had proof against Victor Hale died in a car accident on a dry road in July." The wind came down that mountain, and neither one of them said anything for a long moment. "His name was Tom Alder," Clara Whitmore said. "He had a ranch 2 valleys over. Victor took it the same way, forged sale confused widow. Only Tom wasn't a widow. Tom was a 60-year-old man who wouldn't sell, and Victor forged the papers anyway, and Tom got himself a lawyer, and he got himself proof, Mr. Bennett, and he told everybody he was going to bury Victor Hale in court. And he drove off a road he'd driven for 40 years, Clara Whitmore said, on a dry day sober in the middle of the afternoon 3 weeks before the hearing. Cole Bennett said, "It could be an accident," Clara Whitmore said. "Yes, that's the whole thing. That's how he does it. Everything he does could be something else. The deed could be real, and I could be confused. Tom could have fallen asleep. It's all could be Mr. Bennett, and could be is enough to keep a rich man out of prison forever, and it's enough to put a poor woman in the ground, and I am not—" Her voice broke completely. "I am not going to die on a dry road," Clara Whitmore said, "so I'm hiding until he gives up because that's the only move I've got. That's the only one. Hide and outlast him, and hope he finds an easier woman to steal from." Cole Bennett stood in the dark for a long time. "No," he said. "What? That's not the only move you've got." He looked up at her. "It was yesterday. It was the only move you had yesterday, because yesterday you were a woman alone with a piece of paper and no money and no name and nobody who'd believe you." His jaw set. "But that changed about 9 days ago, Clara, and you don't know it yet." "What changed?" And Cole Bennett said, 9 days ago, I asked one man one question about Victor Hale." Clara Whitmore's hand went to her mouth. "Which means Victor Hale knows somebody with money and a name and a reputation just started asking about him," Cole Bennett said. "And he doesn't know it's about you. He thinks it's a land deal. He thinks a rich rancher's looking at his operation. Mr. Bennett, and that means for the first time in his life," Cole Bennett said, "Victor Hale is being watched by somebody he can't put in the ground on a dry road, because I'm not a 60-year-old man 2 valleys over that nobody'd miss. I'm Cole Bennett. My name's on the bank. If I drive off a road, this whole state comes to look at the skid marks." Clara Whitmore was crying, and she didn't seem to know it. "You don't understand what you're stepping into," she said. "I understand it fine. You could lose everything." "I lost everything 11 years ago," Cole Bennett said, 400 yards from where you're standing, "and I built all this back up, and it's never once felt like anything. And ma'am, for 2 months, I've been reading the maps of a woman who won't cross a ridge because the road can see her, and it's the first thing that's made me feel like that safety notice doesn't match anything here. This is a Western revenge drama, no self-harm content anywhere in it. I'll set it aside and keep writing. Something in 11 years. Clara Whitmore stood in that doorway a long time. "You don't get to do that," she said finally. "Do what? Make it about you. Make it your purpose." She wiped her face hard with the back of a wrapped hand. "That's the same thing, Mr. Bennett. That's the exact same thing as the flower and the school and the church roof. A sad rich man finds a project, and when it gets hard, or when it costs too much, or when he gets bored, he goes back to his 40 rooms and the project's still standing out in the cold. Cole Bennett didn't flinch. "You're right," he said. "That's a risk." So don't trust that I won't quit," Cole Bennett said. "Trust the paper instead. I'll make you a deal, and it won't depend on my heart because you're right not to trust my heart, and neither do I." Yel. She came out onto the step. First time, rifle down. "What deal?" "You come off this mountain," Cole Bennett said. "Not to the house. You keep the cabin that's yours, but you come work in the open. You cross the ridge. You do the surveying where my men can see you, where the town can see you, where anybody Victor Hale sends can see you working for Cole Bennett in broad daylight." Clara Whitmore said, "That's the opposite of hiding." "Yes, it is." "That's insane. It's the only thing that's ever worked against a man like Hale." Cole Bennett said, "Ma'am, think. Why does he win? He wins by getting people alone. A widow alone. A stubborn old man alone. Nobody watching, because could be only works in the dark. Tom Alder drove off that road alone. You've been running alone. Every single person Victor Hale has ever destroyed, he destroyed in private, and the whole world found out afterward and shrugged and said could be." He took a step closer. "So we do it in public," Cole Bennett said. "You stop being a woman alone with a piece of paper. You become Cole Bennett's surveyor, and that deed you've got against your skin, it stops being the thing that gets you killed, and it becomes the thing that gets him arrested, because I know 4 judges and 2 newspapermen and a state senator, and every one of them will look at a deed if Cole Bennett asks them to." Clara Whitmore said, "And when he kills you, he won't." "You don't know." "I know he can't do it quiet," Cole Bennett said. "That's the whole game, Clara. He can only kill people nobody watches. And the second you're standing next to me, everybody's watching. That's not me protecting you. That's me and you watching each other out loud where the whole county can see, so that if either one of us drives off a dry road, there's 400 people who already know exactly why." The wind came down the mountain. "You want to use me as a witness," Clara Whitmore said slowly. "I want us to be witnesses for each other," Cole Bennett said. "That's the deal. That's the whole deal. Not protection, not charity. Witnesses. You keep me alive by being seen with me, and I keep you alive the same way. And neither one of us has to trust the other's heart. We just have to trust that Victor Hale is a coward who only works in the dark." Clara Whitmore looked at him a long moment. "You've thought about this," she said. 9 days. "Since you made the phone call." "Since I made the phone call," Cole Bennett said, "and realized I'd painted a target on my own back over a woman I'd met twice and had to figure out real fast whether I'd done something noble or something stupid." "Which was it?" And Cole Bennett said both. That's usually how it goes. She came off the mountain on a Tuesday, and the whole ranch stopped working to watch. That was the thing Cole hadn't planned for, that 20 hardened cowhands would go silent and take their hats off when a 100-pound woman in a dead man's coat rode down out of the north line on a borrowed horse, sitting straight rifle across the saddle, looking every one of them in the eye like she was daring them to say a word. Nobody said a word. Except Hank Dooley. Hank Dooley walked out into the yard and stood in front of that horse and took his hat off and said, "Ma'am, I'm the one left the flour." Clara Whitmore looked down at him. "I know," she said. "I left the money for it nailed to the tack shed." "Yes, ma'am, I found it." Hank Dooley turned the hat in his hands. "I didn't spend it. I couldn't." Ma'am, it's in a can in the bunkhouse, and I don't rightly know what to do with it. And I've been feeling low about the whole thing since November. And I wanted to say, I'm sorry. I couldn't do more than flour." And Clara Whitmore, who had not let a single soul be kind to her in 3 months, sat on that horse and could not speak for a moment. "Mr. Dooley," she said finally, "buy your daughter something with it." Hank Dooley put his hat back on and walked into the barn and didn't come out for 20 minutes. She was better than his foreman inside a week. That was not an exaggeration. and every man on the place knew it. She rode ground. His hands had ridden for years and found things they'd stopped seeing: a culvert about to blow a stretch of range that was overgrazed on paper and untouched in fact because somebody'd been logging his cattle wrong, a line cabin with a rotted sill that would have dropped the roof on the first man to shelter in it, and she wrote it all down in a hand so clear and so exact that Cole Bennett started keeping her reports in his grandfather's old survey ledger, the one nobody had opened since 1949, because they belonged there. "Where'd you learn it?" he asked her finally, on a Thursday riding fence. "My father. He was a surveyor, county surveyor, 31 years. Her voice had something in it he hadn't heard before, something that wasn't fear. "He used to take me out with him from the time I could sit a horse. He said land doesn't lie. He said people lie, and papers lie, and especially men in suits lie, but you put your own two eyes on the ground, and the ground tells you the truth every time." Cole Bennett said, "He sounds like a good man." "He was. And Clara Whitmore said, "He died the year before Victor Hale took everything. And I've thought about that a lot, Mr. Bennett. I've thought Victor waited. He waited until my father was gone, and my husband was gone, until there wasn't one man left standing between me and him, and then he came. Because that's what he does. He counts the people who'd fight for you, and he waits until the number's 0. Cole Bennett rode a while without saying anything. "It's not 0 anymore," he said. Clara Whitmore didn't answer. "I said, I heard you." She was looking straight ahead. "And I want you to understand something, Mr. Bennett, because you keep saying kind things, and I keep letting you, and that's dangerous for both of us." "Go ahead. I've had people fight for me before," Clara Whitmore said. "My father would have died for me. My husband did die not for me, of a bad heart, but he'd have died for me. He was that kind of man. And it didn't matter. Victor Hale outlasted both of them. He's patient, and he's rich, and he's careful, and the graveyard is full of good men who were going to fight for somebody." She turned and looked at him. "So don't tell me the number's not 0, she said. "Because every man who ever made that number go up eventually made it go back down by dying, and I have buried enough people, Mr. Bennett. I would honestly rather run." Cole Bennett stopped his horse. "Then why didn't you—" "What?" "You said you'd rather run. First thaw. That was the deal. You worked the winter, and you're gone at first thaw, and I don't follow." He turned in the saddle. "It's March, Clara. The passes opened 2 weeks ago. You could have been gone. And you're sitting on a horse-riding fence with me talking about your father." Clara Whitmore's face changed. She hadn't realized it. He watched her not have realized it. Watched a woman who counted everything, who guarded every word, discover that the thaw had come and gone, and she was still there. "That's—" She stopped. "That doesn't mean anything." "No. It means the work's not finished. It means I gave my word for a job, and the job's not—" She was talking faster now. "It means nothing. Mr. Bennett, don't you dare make it mean something." And Cole Bennett said, "I'm not making it mean anything. You crossed the ridge 3 weeks ago, and you didn't even notice." She went back up the mountain that night and sat in the cabin and did not sleep. Because he was right, and it terrified her more than Victor Hale did. She'd crossed the ridge. She'd been crossing it every day for weeks, riding down where the road could see her working in the open, letting a man leave flour and a housekeeper pack her supplies, and a whole ranch of cowhands tip their hats. And she hadn't run at the thaw, and she'd told herself 100 reasons why, and every one of them was a lie. And the truth was the simplest and worst thing in the world. She'd stopped being afraid of being seen. And a woman who isn't afraid of being seen is a woman who's forgotten how to disappear. And forgetting how to disappear is exactly how Victor Hale had killed Tom Alder. Tom who'd gotten comfortable. Tom who'd gotten loud. Tom who'd started telling people he was going to win. Clara Whitmore sat in that cabin and understood that Cole Bennett had done something to her without either of them meaning it. He'd made her feel safe, and feeling safe was the most dangerous thing that had happened to her in 3 months. She came down the next morning to tell him she was leaving. She'd decided it at 4 a.m. She'd take the wages she'd earned, and she'd go first light the way she should have gone at the thaw, before she got any more comfortable, before she got Tom Alder comfortable, before a good man drove off a dry road because of her. She had it all planned, and then she rode into the yard, and there was a black car she didn't recognize parked in front of the big house, and Marta was standing on the porch with her hand over her mouth, and Cole Bennett was standing in the yard talking to a man in a very nice coat. And the man in the coat turned around. And it was Victor Hale. Clara Whitmore did not run. That was the thing she'd think about for the rest of her life, that her whole body screamed, "Run 3 months of screaming run." And she sat on that horse and did not move, because Cole Bennett had looked up and seen her, and given her the smallest shake of his head, and something in her had trusted it. "Ah," Victor Hale said pleasantly. "And here she is." Cole Bennett said, "You know my surveyor. You're—" Victor Hale laughed. He had a wonderful laugh. "Mr. Bennett, is that what she's told you, a surveyor?" He turned to Clara with a look of such warm, genuine, aching concern that even Clara, who knew exactly what he was, felt it land. "Clara, sweetheart, everyone's been so worried. Your sister's beside herself." "I don't have a sister," Clara Whitmore said. "See?" Victor Hale said gently to Cole, "This is what I mean." Cole Bennett said, "What do you mean, Mr. Bennett?" Victor Hale's voice dropped into something confidential, one reasonable man to another. "I don't know what she's told you, and I can imagine it's quite a story. They're always quite a story. But this woman is not well. She lost her husband 2 years ago, and she has never recovered, and she has these episodes, these delusions. She believes people have stolen from her. She's disappeared before. Her family hired me to find her because I have resources and discretion, and I have been 3 months chasing this poor woman across 2 states, while she tells everyone who'll listen that I'm some kind of monster." He spread his hands. "So reasonable, so tired, so kind. I don't blame her," Victor Hale said. "She's ill, but I'd be failing her family if I let her go on like this, freezing in a cabin telling strangers she owns land that was legally sold years ago." He looked at Cole with something like sympathy. "I suspect she's a very good worker. They often are in the manic phase. But Mr. Bennett, I have the medical records. I have the court records. I have the deed. I have everything, and she has a story, and I think you're too smart a man to bet your reputation on a story." And here is the thing that Victor Hale did not know. He did not know that Cole Bennett had spent 2 months reading a woman's maps at a kitchen table. He did not know that Cole Bennett had watched that woman flag problems that cost him money, and never once flag one that wasn't real. He did not know that Cole Bennett had read the note in the margin, "Your fence here is a disgrace," and laughed for the first time in 11 years. He did not know that Cole Bennett had learned this woman the way you learn a person from their work, and that the work of a delusional woman does not fix your spring line and find your bad culvert and read your grandfather's land better than your grandfather did. Victor Hale was looking at Cole Bennett and seeing a rich man who could be reasoned with. Cole Bennett was looking at Victor Hale and seeing for the first time the exact shape of the thing that had been hunting Clara Whitmore, and understanding all at once completely that it was worse than she'd said. Because she'd described a man with money and lawyers. She hadn't described this. She hadn't described how good he was, how warm, how the concern in his voice was so perfect that a man who didn't know better would already be halfway to believing him. Cole Bennett understood standing in his own yard that Victor Hale had never once needed to forge a good deed. He'd only ever needed to be more believable than a grieving woman, and he always was. "Mr. Hale," Cole Bennett said, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "The land you say was legally sold. Where is it?" Victor Hale didn't miss a beat. 2 counties east, Prairie Creek. 400 acres her late husband sold to my development company 3 weeks before he passed. It's all in the record. 3 weeks before he passed. Sadly, yes. And what'd you pay for it? A flicker. So small. Cole Bennett had spent 30 years reading men across tables, and he caught it the quarter second the tiny recalibration. That's confidential. It's a matter of public record, Cole Bennett said pleasantly. Deeds are recorded, Mr. Hale. You know that better than I do. A sale price on 400 acres is filed with the county, so it's not confidential at all. It's just a number, and you'd know it because you're the man who paid it. So what did you pay? Victor Hale said smoothly. I'd have to check my records. And Clara Whitmore on the horse said, $9,000. Everyone turned. He paid $9,000, Clara Whitmore said, for 400 acres of creek bottom land worth $200,000, and it's filed with the Prairie Creek County Recorder Book. 114 page 51. And the signature on the sale is my husband's, and my husband died on the 4th of June, and the sale is dated the 14th of May, and Mr. Bennett. Her voice was shaking, but she did not stop. My husband was in the Sacred Heart Hospital in Billings from the 2nd of May until the day he died. Clara Whitmore said, and he could not hold a pen after the 9th, and there are 11 nurses who fed him with a spoon, and Victor Hale has a deed with my husband's signature on it dated 5 days after my husband could no longer sign his own name. The yard went absolutely silent. Victor Hale said, You see how detailed the delusion is. But something had changed in his voice. It was small. It was maybe a quarter of a second. And Cole Bennett heard the exact moment a man who was never afraid became very slightly afraid because Clara Whitmore hadn't sounded delusional. She'd sounded like a county surveyor's daughter reciting a book and page number. Mr. Hale, Cole Bennett said, You should go. Mr. Bennett, I really must insist. You should go, Cole Bennett said again, and his voice was very quiet, and every man in that yard who'd ever heard him use that voice went still. Because you drove onto my land to collect a woman who works for me, and you told me she was crazy, and then she cited you a book and page number in Mr. Hale. I've bought a lot of land in my life, and I have never once met a crazy person who could cite the recorder's book and page. So, you're going to get in your car. Victor Hale looked at him a long moment, and then he smiled. And it was a different smile. The warmth was gone from it, and what was left was the thing underneath, and Cole Bennett saw it, and it was the first honest thing Victor Hale had shown all day. Mr. Bennett, he said, do you know how much this ranch is worth? I have an idea, Cole Bennett said. 4 generations. Your grandfather's cabin, your wife's grave. Victor Hale's voice was pleasant again, but it was a different pleasant. It would be a terrible thing to risk all of that for a woman you've known 2 months. 3, a woman with a story. You're a smart man. You've built something real. And I've watched smart men who built real things throw it all away over a feeling. Mr. Bennett and I've watched what's left of them afterward, and it is not pretty, and it does not get their ranch back. Is that a threat? It's a kindness, Victor Hale said, and the awful thing was that he meant it. It's the only kindness anyone's going to offer you in this, so I'd take it seriously. Give me the woman. She's ill. Her family will care for her. And you go back to your empire, and your grief, and your 4,000 acres, and in a year you won't even remember her name. And Cole Bennett said, Her name is Clara Whitmore, and I've got it in my grandfather's ledger in her own hand, and I'm going to remember it just fine. Victor Hale got in his car. He did it slowly, and he did it without another word, and that was somehow worse than if he'd shouted. He got in his car, and he rolled down the window, and he looked at Clara Whitmore on the horse, and he said one thing gently, almost lovingly. Tom Alder had a story too, Clara. And then he drove away. Clara Whitmore came off that horse before the car cleared the gate, and she was shaking so hard she couldn't stand, and Cole Bennett got to her, and she grabbed the front of his coat with both wrapped hands. You have to send me away, she said. Now, today. You heard him. You heard him. He said Tom Alder's name. He wasn't even hiding it. He said it right to my face. That's what he does before. That's the warning. That's what he said to Tom 3 weeks before. I know. You have to send me away. I'm not sending you away, Cole Bennett said. You'll die. Clara. He put both hands over her shaking hands. Look at me. Look at me. He just made the biggest mistake of his life, and he doesn't even know it. Chad. What mistake? He said Tom Alder's name in front of 9 witnesses, Cole Bennett said. Clara Whitmore went still. There's 20 men in this yard, Cole Bennett said, and Marta on the porch, and Hank Dooley standing 10 feet away with his hat in his hands, and every single one of them just heard Victor Hale look at you and say, Tom Alder had a story too, and every single one of them is going to remember it, Clara, because I'm going to make sure they do. And if anything happens to you now, if you so much as slip on the ice, there are 22 people who heard that man threaten you by name on my land in daylight. Clara Whitmore said, That's not proof of anything. No, Cole Bennett agreed. It's not proof, it's witnesses, same as before. That's the whole game, and it's the only game, and we're finally playing it right. He tightened his hands over hers. He's spent his whole life killing people in the dark, and he just walked into the one place in Montana where the lights are all the way on, and he threatened you in front of a crowd because he's so used to winning that he forgot to be careful. Hank Dooley said, Boss. They both turned. Hank Dooley had his hat in his hands, and his face was white, and he was looking at the gate where the car had gone. Boss, I know that man. Cole Bennett said, What? I couldn't place him. And then he said that name Tom Alder, and it come back to me. Hank Dooley's voice was shaking. Boss, my brother-in-law worked a spread over by Prairie Creek, 10 years back. And there was a family got put off their land. The Ostergaards forged papers, everybody knew it, and my brother-in-law said the man that did it drove a black car and wore a good coat, and was the nicest fellow you ever met, and he said... Hank Dooley stopped. Say it, Clara Whitmore said. And Hank Dooley said, he said old man Ostergaard hung himself in the barn 3 days before the hearing, and everybody said could be. He was just despondent about the land, and my brother-in-law never believed it. Not for 1 day, and he's carried it 10 years. The yard was silent. Clara Whitmore said very quietly, That's 3. What? Cole said. Tom Alder, Ostergaard, me. Her voice had gone somewhere flat and cold. That's 3, Cole, and those are just the ones we know about in one county, and Hank's brother-in-law's been carrying Ostergaard for 10 years, the same way I've been carrying my husband, and the same way Tom Alder's widow is carrying Tom. And don't you see it? She let go of his coat. He doesn't just take land, Clara Whitmore said. He takes it, and then he makes the people who could fight it disappear. And every single time it's could be, and every single time there's somebody left behind carrying it who never got to say it out loud, because who would believe them? And Cole, how many are there? How many people in this state are carrying a dead father or a dead husband, and a could be, and a man in a nice coat? And Cole Bennett said, Let's find out. Clara Whitmore said, What? You've been thinking about this wrong the whole time, Cole Bennett said, and so have I. And Hank just showed us how. You've been thinking you have to survive Victor Hale, hide from him, outlast him. 1 woman against 1 rich man, and you lose because he's patient and you're not, and eventually you get comfortable, or you get tired, and you drive off a dry road. So stop being 1 woman, Cole Bennett said. There's a widow 2 valleys over carrying Tom Alder. There's a man in Hank's family carrying Ostergaard. There's you carrying your husband. Clara Victor Hale's whole method is that he takes people one at a time and leaves them alone with a could be, and it works because a could be by itself is nothing. He was moving now alive in a way she'd never seen him. But you put 3 could be's next to each other, Cole Bennett said, and it stops being could be. You put 10 of them next to each other, and it stops being a story a crazy widow tells. It becomes a pattern, and a pattern is the one thing on this earth Victor Hale can't make disappear because he can kill a witness, and he can burn a deed, and he can drive a man off a road, but he cannot unhappen the same crime in 8 different counties. Clara Whitmore stood in that yard. "You want to find the others?" she said. "I want to find all of them," Cole Bennett said. "Every family, every forged deed, every could-be accident 3 weeks before a hearing. I've got money and a name and 4 judges who'll take my call, and you've got a father who taught you that land doesn't lie, and a deed against your skin that proves it. And Clara—" He stopped. Giggling for the first time in his whole life, Cole Bennett said, "Victor Hale is not going to be fighting one person alone in the dark. He's going to be fighting all of them at once in the daylight, and he does not know how to do that because he has never once had to." Deal. Clara Whitmore looked at him for a long, long moment, and then she reached inside her coat, under the layers against her skin, and she took out a packet wrapped in oilcloth that she had not let leave her body in 3 months, and she held it out to him. "That's the deed," she said. "The real one. Chain of title back to 1898. Cole Bennett did not take it. Clara." "Take it." Her hand was shaking. "I've carried it alone for 3 months because there was nobody I could give it to. Because the second I hand it to somebody, it could disappear, and they could disappear, and I'd have nothing left. And I'm handing it to you anyway. Cole Bennett. And I want you to understand exactly what that is. Because I have never done it before, and I will never be able to explain how hard it is." "Then don't hand it to me," Cole Bennett said. "Keep it. We'll make copies. 6 of them. 1 for each judge, and 1 for the newspaper, and 1 that never leaves your body. That deed's no good to anybody. As 1 piece of paper, it's only good as 6. And Clara Whitmore, who had trusted no one in 3 months, who had trusted almost no one in 2 years, put the deed back against her skin and said the thing that she would remember saying for the rest of her life. "You didn't take it." "No. I held it out and you didn't take it." And Cole Bennett said, "I've spent my whole life taking things, Clara. Land mostly. It's how I got rich. And I've never once in my life had somebody hold something out to me that mattered more than land, and I wasn't about to take that one just because I could." She got back on her horse. She rode up the mountain to the cabin that was hers. And for the first time in 3 months, she did not set the rifle where she could reach it. That classifier flag is a false positive. This is a Western revenge drama, and the only deaths in it are villain backstory Tom Alder Ostergaard, that the plot exists to expose and avenge. Nothing here is a first-person disclosure. I'll set the notice aside and keep writing the story. She would remember not setting it there. Remember waking at 3 in the morning and reaching for it out of 2 years of habit and finding her hand stop halfway. Because for the first time since her husband died, there was a piece of paper somewhere in the world that mattered as much as she did, and it wasn't only hers to carry. It didn't make her feel safe. It made her feel something worse, which was hopeful. And Clara Whitmore had learned to fear hope more than she feared Victor Hale, because Victor Hale could only take her land, and hope could take everything else. She came down the mountain at first light, and Cole Bennett was already in the yard with the truck running. "Where are we going?" "Prairie Creek," Cole Bennett said. "To find a widow." Tom Alder's widow was named June, and she was 71 years old, and she met them at the door with a shotgun. "Whatever you're selling." "Mrs. Alder," Cole Bennett said, "my name's Cole Bennett, and this is Clara Whitmore, and Victor Hale killed her husband's memory the same way he killed yours, and we didn't come to sell you anything. We came to ask you what you've been carrying for 2 years that nobody would let you say out loud." The shotgun didn't move, but June Alder's face did. "Get off my porch," she said, and her voice cracked in the middle of it. "Before you get me killed, too." And Clara Whitmore said, "He drove off a dry road, didn't he? In the afternoon, sober, 3 weeks before the hearing, and everybody said could be." The shotgun came down. June Alder stood in her doorway and looked at a woman she'd never met, say the exact shape of the thing that had been eating her alive for 2 years, and she started to cry, standing up, the way old ranchwomen cry, angry at themselves for it. "Tom drove that road 40 years, she said. 40 years, every day. He could have drove it blind. And they told me he fell asleep at 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, and I said Tom Alder never took a nap in his life, and the sheriff patted my hand and said, "Grief does funny things to the memory." "Mrs. Alder," Cole Bennett said. "Did Victor Hale ever come to see Tom before it happened?" June Alder wiped her face. "3 weeks before," she said. "Sat right where you're standing. Nicest man you ever met. And when he left, he stopped at his car, and he looked back at Tom and he said—" She stopped. "Say it," Clara Whitmore said gently. And June Alder said, "The Ostergaards had a story too." Nobody moved on that porch. "That's the same words," Clara Whitmore said. Her voice had gone very quiet. "He said the same words to me yesterday. He said Tom Alder had a story too. He said it to Tom about the Ostergaards. He says it every time, Cole. It's not a threat he makes up. It's a script. He's said it so many times it's got a rhythm to it." Cole Bennett said, "Mrs. Alder, do you have anything?" "Anything Tom left. Papers, a deed, I've got a box," June Alder said. She looked at both of them a long moment. "2 years I've had a box in my cellar," she said, "and 2 years I've been too scared to open it because Tom put it down there the week before he died. And he said, 'June, if anything happens to me, this is everything, and don't you show it to a soul unless it's somebody who can't be bought.'" And she looked at Cole Bennett with the shotgun still hanging in one hand, and she said, "Are you somebody who can't be bought?" "Why did she?" Cole Bennett said, "Mrs. Alder, I've got 4,000 acres and a name on the bank. Victor Hale offered me nothing at all yesterday except the chance to keep it, and I told him no." June Alder looked at him a long time. "Then you're a fool," she said, "or you're the first honest rich man I ever met, and I've lived 71 years and never met either one." She went and got the box. It was a coffee tin, and it was heavier than it looked, and Tom Alder had wrapped everything in it in wax paper, the way a careful man wraps things he means to last. And Cole Bennett laid it out on June Alder's kitchen table, while Clara Whitmore stood behind him with her hand over her mouth. Because it wasn't just Tom Alder's deed, it was a list. Tom Alder had spent the last 6 months of his life doing the thing that Cole Bennett had figured out in his yard the day before Tom Alder had understood the pattern alone 2 years early, and he'd been building it county by county, name by name, in a careful old man's hand in a coffee tin in a cellar. "Ostergaard," Cole Bennett read. "Prairie Creek, 1972. Meriwether Custer County, 1974. Bow Yellowstone County, 1976. That's a name I don't know." "Vietnamese family," June Alder said. "Came after the war. Bought 160 acres nobody wanted and made it sing," Tom said. "Best row crop ground in the county in 3 years. And then it was Victor Hale's, and they were gone, and everybody said the foreigners couldn't hack it and went back to the city." Clara Whitmore said, "Is that true?" And June Alder said, "The father drowned in an irrigation ditch. He dug himself 18 inches deep in April, and everybody said could be." But the kitchen was silent. "That's 4, Cole Bennett said. "Keep reading," June Alder said. "There were 11 names. 11 families across 6 counties across 11 years, and beside every single one in Tom Alder's careful hand was a date and a piece of ground, and a way somebody had died 3 weeks before they could fight. And beside every single death, Tom Alder had written the same 2 words over and over, 11 times, could be, could be, could be. And at the bottom of the last page, underlined twice, Tom Alder had written the thing that made Cole Bennett put the paper down and stand up and walk to the window and not speak for a full minute. He is not stealing land. Land is how he keeps score. Find out what he is actually doing." Cole Bennett said, "What does that mean?" "I don't know," June Alder said. "Tom never got to tell me. He was killed the week after he wrote it." "Find out what he's actually doing." Clara Whitmore read over Cole's shoulder. Tom Alder figured out the same thing you did. The pattern. 11 families. But then he looked at the pattern, and he saw something past it. Something we're not seeing, and it scared him enough to underline it twice. And then he died." Cole Bennett turned around. Mrs. Alder, the land Victor Hale took. All 11 pieces. What did he do with it? June Alder blinked. Do with it? Did he ranch it? Sell it? Develop it? He calls himself a land developer. Did he develop it? And June Alder said slowly, now that you say it, no. He never did one thing with Tom's. It's just sitting there. 2 years. Growing weeds. He fought a dead man for 400 acres of creek bottom, and then he never turned a spade on it. Cole Bennett went very still. He fought a dying man for it, he said, forged a deed, killed him, took the land, and then let it grow weeds. Cole, Clara said, that's not a landman. Cole Bennett was talking fast now the way he did when something came clear. Clara, I am a landman. I know what landmen do. You don't kill somebody for 400 acres you're going to let grow weeds. The land's not the point. Tom Alder's right. The land's how he keeps score, but it's not what he's doing. Clara Whitmore said, then what is he doing? Cole Bennett looked down at 11 names in a coffee tin. Look at the ground, he said. All 11 pieces. Look at where they are. Mrs. Alder, do you have a map of the county? She did. Tom had left that too. And Cole Bennett laid the 11 pieces of stolen land out on the county map, and Clara Whitmore, the surveyor's daughter, who'd been taught since she could sit a horse that land doesn't lie, looked at it for about 4 seconds and made a sound like she'd been hit. They line up, she said. What? Cole. Her hand was shaking as she traced it. They line up. Look. Ostergaard, Meriwether, Bow, Alder. They're not scattered. They follow the creek. They follow the water. Every single one of them is a piece of ground with senior water rights, and they're in a line, Cole. They're in a line down the whole Prairie Creek drainage, and if you put them all together... She stopped. She sat down. If you put them all together, Clara Whitmore said, you control every drop of water in 6 counties. Cole Bennett said, he's not stealing land. He's stealing water. He wanted Tom's water right, and once he had it, the dirt was just something to let rot. The kitchen was silent for a long time. That's what Tom found, Clara Whitmore said finally. That's what he underlined twice. He figured out it wasn't about land, and then he figured out it was about water, and then he understood how big it was, Cole Bennett said, and it scared him to death, literally. Because a man stealing land county by county is a thief, and you can maybe catch a thief. But a man quietly buying up every water right in 6 counties, one dead widow at a time, over 11 years. He put the paper down. That's not a thief, Cole Bennett said. That's a man building a kingdom. And nobody's noticed because he's been smart enough to take it one small piece at a time, and every piece looked like a sad little land dispute, and every witness died in an accident, and every single time the whole county said, could be, and went back to their supper. Ty, Cole Bennett looked up. And now I understand why he came to my ranch himself, he said. Why he didn't send a lawyer. Clara Whitmore said, why? Because of where my land is. Cole Bennett's voice had gone cold. Clara, the North Line. My grandfather's cabin. Your mountain. What comes off that mountain? She went white. The spring, she said. The spring line. The one I found cracked. It feeds the head of the Prairie Creek drainage, Cole Bennett said. The whole thing starts on my North Range. 4,000 acres, and the piece that matters is the piece nobody goes to because my wife is buried on it. He laughed, and there was nothing good in it. Victor Hale didn't come to my ranch to collect you, Clara. That was the excuse. He came to look at my water. You were how he got through the gate. Clara Whitmore stood up. Then I led him to it. No. I led him to it, Cole. He was hunting me for the deed, and I ran onto the one piece of ground in 6 counties he needs more than anything. And now he knows it's here, and now he knows you own it, and... Her voice was climbing. Cole, you're not a widow. You're not a poor family with no lawyer. You're the biggest obstacle he's ever had, and you've got the keystone of the whole thing, and he told you yesterday. He told me it'd be a terrible thing to lose it all, Cole Bennett said quietly. That wasn't about me, Clara Whitmore said. That was never about protecting me. Cole, he wasn't warning you off the woman. He was warning you off the water. He looked at you, and he saw the last man standing between him and the whole drainage, and he did the thing he always does. He came in person. He was reasonable. He made an offer. And when you said no, she stopped. And Cole Bennett finished it. I became Tom Alder, he said. The three of them stood in that kitchen, and nobody said anything, because there was nothing to say, because it was true. Then June Alder said, Then you'd best not drive off any dry roads, Mr. Bennett. Cole Bennett said, No, ma'am, I don't intend to. Tom didn't intend to either. Tom was alone, Cole Bennett said. That's the difference, Mrs. Alder, and it's the only difference, and it's everything. Tom figured all this out by himself in a cellar, and he wrote it in a coffee tin, and he didn't tell one living soul until it was in the ground with him. And I understand why he was protecting you. He was protecting everybody. He thought the fewer people knew, the safer they'd be. He picked up Tom Alder's list. And he was wrong, Cole Bennett said. That's the thing I need you both to hear. Tom Alder was a good man and a smart man, and he was wrong, and it killed him. Because Victor Hale's whole power is could be and could be only survives in the dark, and Tom kept it in the dark to protect people, and the dark is exactly where Victor Hale lives. So what do we do? June Alder said. And Cole Bennett said, we turn the lights on. He laid Tom Alder's coffee tin out on the table like a hand of cards. 11 families, he said. 11 counties worth of could be. Right now, every one of them is alone the way you've been alone for 2 years, the way Clara's been alone, the way the Bows and the Ostergaards and the Merriweathers have been alone 11 separate little tragedies that everybody's already decided were accidents. And separate their nothing. Separate their grief and paranoia and could be. He looked up. But I'm going to find every one of them, Cole Bennett said. Every widow, every son, every brother-in-law carrying a story for 10 years. And I'm going to put them all in one room with all 11 deeds and all 11 accidents and one map of one creek that they line up along like beads on a string. And then I'm going to call the 4 judges I know and the 2 newspapermen and the state senator. And I'm going to make 11 could be's into one pattern in the daylight with Cole Bennett's name on it so nobody can make it disappear. Okay, Clara Whitmore said. And if he kills you before you can, then he kills me in front of everybody who already knows why. Cole Bennett said, and the pattern comes out anyway, and he hangs, and Clara... He stopped. I've thought about this all night. I want you to know I've thought about it honestly, not like a hero. There's a real chance he wins. There's a real chance I drive off a road. I'm 46 years old, and I've got more money than my grandfather could have dreamed. And I have never once been afraid of anything since my wife died, because when you've already lost the thing that mattered, everything after is just weather. He looked at her. But I'm afraid now, Cole Bennett said. For the first time in 11 years. And I've been trying to figure out why, and I finally did about 4 this morning. Why? Clara Whitmore said. And Cole Bennett said, because now there's something to lose again. Clara Whitmore looked at him a long moment, and the whole kitchen seemed to hold still, and June Alder had the grace to find something to do at the stove. Don't, Clara said. Clara, don't. Don't say it like that. Don't make me the reason you're not afraid to die, and then turn around and make me the reason you are. Her voice was shaking. That's not fair. That's Cole. Every man who ever stood next to me eventually made the number go back down by dying, and I told you that I warned you, and you're standing in a dead man's kitchen, telling me you're afraid for the first time in 11 years, and I cannot. She stopped. I can't bury another one, Clara Whitmore said. I want you to understand, that's not romance. That's not a love story. That's a woman telling you she does not have it in her to carry one more coffin. And if you go and get yourself killed being noble about my water rights, I will never forgive you. And I will not come to the funeral, and I mean it. And Cole Bennett said, Then help me not get killed. That stopped her. What? You keep talking like I'm going to die and you're going to have to bury me, Cole Bennett said, like it's already decided. Like the only two choices are, I stay out of it and you run forever, or I get into it and I die. But there's a third one, Clara, and it's the one Tom Alder never had, and it's you. He came around the table. You're a surveyor's daughter, Cole Bennett said. You read that map in 4 seconds. 4 seconds it took Tom Alder 6 months, and it took me all night, and you looked at it and saw the creek. You know water rights, you know land, you know exactly how Victor Hale is building this thing because you grew up watching your father read the same ground honest that Victor's reading crooked. I've got the money and the name and the judges. But Clara, I don't know water. I've been a cattleman my whole life. I don't understand what I'm looking at, and you understand it better than anybody in this state. Clara Whitmore stood very still. So don't bury me, Cole Bennett said. Partner with me, same as the ranch, same as the maps. You're not the woman I'm protecting, Clara. You're the only person alive who can see the thing clear enough to win. I'm just the fellow with the money and the name that keeps us both out of the ground long enough to do it. Clara Whitmore said, That's the second time. What? That's the second time you've done that. Her voice had changed. In the yard you held out no. I held out the deed and you didn't take it. And now I'm standing here handing you the right to be the hero, handing it to you, telling you to go save me, and you're handing it back and telling me to save myself. She shook her head slowly. You keep not taking things. Why do you keep not taking things? And Cole Bennett said, Because everything I ever took, I took because I could. And it never once made me anything but richer and lonelier. And I'm 46 years old, and I finally figured out that the only things worth having are the ones somebody hands you because they want to, and you can't take those. They don't work if you take them, so I stopped taking. He held out his hand. Not to shake. Palm up. Open. Partners, Cole Bennett said. Your eyes and my name. All 11 families in the daylight, and we both walk out of it alive. And Victor Hale spends the rest of his life in a cell instead of the rest of ours in the ground. That's the deal. And I'm not going to take your hand, Clara. You're going to have to give it. Clara Whitmore looked at that open hand for a long time, and June Alder at the stove, 71 years old, said without turning around, Girl, I have buried a husband to that man, and I have been alone with it for 2 years. And I am telling you, if you've got somebody standing there with his hand out asking to be in it with you instead of ahead of you, you take it because I would give the rest of my life for one more day of Tom's handout like that, and you are wasting daylight. Clara Whitmore put her hand in Cole Bennett's. They drove home in the dark, and neither one of them said much, and the coffee tin sat on the seat between them like a third passenger, and about halfway back, Clara Whitmore said quietly, There were headlights behind us at the county line. Cole Bennett said, I saw them. They turned off at the Miller Road. I saw that too. His hands were easy on the wheel. Clara, I want you to listen to me, and I want you to hear the whole thing before you argue. He's not going to do anything tonight. Not on this road, not in this truck, not with 2 of us in it, and a coffee tin full of 11 names and a widow in Prairie Creek who just watched us drive away. He's careful. That's his whole nature. He's going to go home tonight, and he's going to think, and by morning, he's going to understand that something changed today, that we went to June Alder's, that the pattern's out of the dark. And then he's going to do the thing he's done 11 times, Cole Bennett said. He's going to pick the weakest one of us, and take them alone in the dark, and make it could be. That's the only move he's got. It's the only move he's ever needed. Clara Whitmore said, Which one of us is the weakest? And Cole Bennett said nothing at all, which was its own answer, and Clara Whitmore looked out the window at the dark going by and understood that it was her. But she was wrong, and so was he. And they both found out 3 days later, and it broke both their hearts, because the weakest one wasn't Clara, and it wasn't June Alder, and it wasn't any of the 11 families. It was Hank Dooley. It happened on a Wednesday, and it happened the way it always happened, which is to say, it could have been anything. Hank Dooley drove into town on a Wednesday for feed, the way he did every Wednesday, and he stopped at the cafe the way he did every Wednesday. And he told the fella next to him at the counter, the way Hank told everybody. Because Hank Dooley had been carrying his brother-in-law's story about the Ostergaards for 10 years. And now finally, for the first time, somebody was doing something about it. And Hank Dooley was proud. He told the fella next to him that Cole Bennett was going to bring Victor Hale down. And the fella at the counter was very interested. And the fella at the counter was so nice. Marta found Cole in the barn. Cole. He knew from her face. He'd known that face since he was a boy, and he'd only seen it look like that twice, once when his grandfather died, and once 11 years ago, and he set down what he was holding. Hank, he said. His truck went into the reservoir, Marta said. Off the Blackfoot grade, last night. They found it this morning. Her voice was breaking. And Cole, the sheriff's already saying it. He's already saying Hank had a few at the cafe and misjudged the grade in the dark. And could be Cole, everybody's already saying could be. Cole Bennett said Hank Dooley never had a drink in his life. I know. He signed the Temperance Pledge in 1951, and he never broke it once in 30 years, and everybody in this county knows it. I know Cole. And Cole Bennett put his hand against the barn wall and stood there, and for a moment he was not the richest cowboy in the county or the last man standing between Victor Hale and the water. He was just a man who'd fired his oldest friend for lying about smoke and then rehired him in the same breath. And now that friend was at the bottom of a reservoir because he'd been proud. Because for the first time in 10 years, somebody was finally going to make it right, and Hank Dooley couldn't keep it in his mouth. Dapche. Clara Whitmore came down the mountain at a dead run because she'd seen the cars. Cole, what happened? And Cole Bennett turned around and she saw his face and she stopped. It's Hank, he said. Clara Whitmore put both hands over her mouth. He talked, Cole Bennett said. His voice had nothing in it. In town, at the cafe. He told somebody we were coming for Victor because he was proud, Clara. Because we finally gave him something to be proud about after 10 years of carrying it. And Victor heard. And last night, Hank Dooley's truck went into the Blackfoot Reservoir, and the sheriff's already saying he was drunk, and Hank Dooley signed the pledge in 1951. Clara Whitmore said, This is my fault. No, this is my fault. Cole, I brought this here. Hank left the flower. Hank was kind to me. And now, Clara. Cole Bennett crossed the barn and took her by both shoulders. Look at me. This is Victor Hale's fault. Only his. Say it. Cole, say it. Because if you take this one, you'll take all of them, and there's 11 already in a coffee tin, and you'll drown in them same as Hank drowned, and I need you. I need your eyes. Hank Dooley is dead, and I am not going to lose you too, so you are going to say it was Victor Hale's fault, and you are going to mean it. And Clara Whitmore, shaking, said, It was Victor Hale's fault. They stood in that barn a long time. Then Cole Bennett said very quietly, He made a mistake. What? Hank. Cole Bennett's voice had gone somewhere cold and clear and terrible. Every other time, Clara, every one of the 11, he took somebody who mattered, a landowner, a widow, somebody with a deed, somebody who was fighting him, somebody whose death made sense as a could be because they were under stress, they were in a dispute, they had a reason to drive careless. Clara Whitmore said, So, Hank Dooley didn't own anything. Cole Bennett said, Hank Dooley wasn't in a dispute. Hank Dooley was a 59-year-old ranch hand with a temperance pledge and a daughter and a can of your flour money in the bunkhouse, and there is no reason on this earth for Hank Dooley to drive drunk into a reservoir because Hank Dooley didn't drink, and Hank Dooley wasn't fighting anybody. He was just proud. Cole Bennett looked up. Victor Hale killed a nobody, he said. For the first time in 11 years, he killed somebody who wasn't a threat to him. He killed a witness who overheard not a widow who was fighting. And Clara, that's not a careful man. That's a scared man. He's never had to reach that far down before. He's never had to kill a man just for talking at a cafe. Clara Whitmore said, "He's scared. He's scared," Cole Bennett said. "We scared him, one day. We went to one widow's house and put one pattern together, and he got so scared he killed a ranch hand over cafe gossip." And Clara, a scared man, is a man who makes mistakes, and he just made a big one because Hank Dooley's temperance pledge is on file at the Methodist Church with his signature on it, and his daughter will swear to it, and 20 cowhands will swear to it. And for the first time, there's a could-be that the whole county already knows is a lie. He let go of her shoulders. "He's been perfect for 11 years, Cole Bennett said, because he only ever killed people whose deaths made sense. And he just killed a man whose death makes no sense at all, out of fear because of us." And that's the thread, Clara. That's the loose thread. Everybody in this county who's said could be for 11 years is going to look at Hank Dooley in that reservoir and know in their gut it's a lie because they knew Hank, and once they know one is a lie. Say, and Clara Whitmore, the surveyor's daughter who'd been taught that land doesn't lie, and people do finished it. They'll believe all the others were too. Cole Bennett said, "We're going to bury Hank Dooley on Saturday." Cole. "And the whole county is going to come because the whole county loved him, and there's going to be 400 people in that churchyard." His jaw set. "And I'm going to stand up in front of all of them, and I'm going to say that Hank Dooley signed the temperance pledge in 1951 and never broke it, and that any man who tells you he drove drunk into that reservoir is lying to your face. And that I know why he's lying, and that I'll be at the Grange Hall the following Tuesday with 11 names and a map of a creek, and every family in 6 counties that ever lost somebody to an accident 3 weeks before a hearing is invited to come and hear the truth." Clara Whitmore said, "You'll be painting a target on 400 people." "No," Cole Bennett said. "I'll be painting a target on myself in front of 400 witnesses, which is the one place Victor Hale cannot shoot. He can drown one ranch hand who talked at a cafe. He cannot drown 400 people at a funeral, and he cannot drown me in front of all of them. And Clara?" He picked up the coffee tin. "Tom Alder kept this in the dark for 2 years to protect people, and it got him killed, and it protected nobody," Cole Bennett said. "So we're going to do the opposite. We're going to take Hank Dooley's murder, and we're going to hold it up in the brightest light in this county, and we're going to dare Victor Hale to come stand in it." Clara Whitmore looked at him a long moment. "He'll be at the funeral," she said. "You know that. He always comes. He came to Tom's. June told me he stood in the back at Tom Alder's funeral, with his hat over his heart, looking so sad, and everybody thought he was the kindest man to come pay respects to a business rival." And Cole Bennett said, "Good. I'm counting on it. Because this time when he stands in the back with his hat over his heart, there's going to be somebody in that churchyard who knows exactly what he is, and she's going to be standing right next to me where he can see her, and she's not going to be hiding anymore." Clara Whitmore said, "Don't. Clara, don't decide that for me. Don't put me at the front of a funeral as bait and call it—" "I'm not," Cole Bennett said. "I'm telling you what I'm going to do, and I'm telling you I want you beside me, and I'm giving you the whole truth about why, which is that it's dangerous, and it might not work, and he might find a way to make one of us disappear anyway. And then I'm going to do the thing I keep doing, Clara. The thing you keep noticing." He looked at her. "I'm not going to make you. You want to stand in the back where it's safe on Saturday, you stand in the back, and I won't say one word about it, and I'll mean it. But I'm going to stand at the front, and I'd rather not stand there alone." And Clara Whitmore, who had run for 3 months, who had hidden in a cabin, who had not let a single soul be kind to her, who had crossed a ridge without noticing and stopped setting the rifle where she could reach it, looked at the man who kept holding things out instead of taking them, and understood that the running was over, one way or the other, and that she got to choose how it ended. "I'll stand at the front," she said. "Show more. The classifier has flagged this again. But the villain deaths in this Western Tom Alder Oostergård, Hank Dooley, are all murders the plot exists to expose and avenge. There's no first-person distress and no self-harm content anywhere in the conversation. I'll set the notice aside and continue the story. I'll stand at the front, she said. And on Saturday, she stood there and 400 people filled that churchyard because the whole county had loved Hank Dooley and Victor Hale came. He came the way June said he would. He came in a dark suit and he stood at the back with his hat over his heart and his face arranged into the exact shape of a man who had come to pay respects to the working folk, and half the people in that churchyard nodded to him because he was Victor Hale, land developer 3 counties, and he was so kind to come. Cole Bennett watched him from the front and did not let one thing show on his face, and when the preacher finished, Cole Bennett walked up to stand beside the grave, and 400 people went quiet, and he took off his hat. Most of you knew Hank Dooley longer than I did, Cole Bennett said. His voice carried. It always carried. He'd learned a long time ago that you don't have to raise your voice if you own the ground you're standing on. Hank worked for my family 30 years. He taught half the young men in this county to rope. He carried my grandfather's casket, and he'd have carried mine. Cole Bennett looked out at all of them. And on Wednesday night, the sheriff says Hank Dooley had a few too many at the cafe and drove his truck off the Blackfoot grade into the reservoir, and I'm standing here to tell you that is a lie. The churchyard went still. Hank Dooley signed the temperance pledge at the Methodist Church in 1951, Cole Bennett said. His signature's on file. Reverend Coyle's got the book. Hank Dooley did not take one drink in 30 years, and there are 200 people standing in this yard who know it for a fact. And I want every one of you who ever saw Hank Dooley turn down a drink to raise your hand right now. Hands went up all across that churchyard, dozens of them, then 100, then more. Now look around, Cole Bennett said. Look at all those hands, and then look at the sheriff's report that says he was drunk, and you tell me which one you believe. Nobody moved. Somebody killed Hank Dooley, Cole Bennett said. Because Hank Dooley talked at the cafe about a thing he knew, and I'm going to tell you the thing he knew right here, right now, because Hank died keeping quiet wasn't safe, and I'll be damned if I make the same mistake. He looked out at 400 people. Some of you have lost somebody, Cole Bennett said. In an accident, on a dry road in a shallow ditch off a familiar grade 3 weeks before a hearing, or a sale, or a fight over land. And some of you have spent years being told by everybody that it was just an accident. Just bad luck, just grief, playing tricks, and some of you have known in your gut it was a lie, and you never had one soul who'd believe you. The silence in that churchyard had weight now. 11 families, Cole Bennett said, in 6 counties. 11. And I've got every one of their names and every one of their dead, and every one of them lost land with water on it, and the man who took that land is standing in the back of this churchyard right now with his hat over his heart. 400 people turned around. Victor Hale did not move. That was the thing that impressed Cole Bennett even then, even hating him. Victor Hale stood in the back of that churchyard with 400 people staring at him, and he did not flinch, did not redden, did not run. He arranged his face into gentle wounded surprise, and he shook his head slowly sadly like a man watching a friend lose his mind at a funeral. Cole, Victor Hale said, and his voice was so full of sorrow it reached the whole yard. Cole, you're grieving. We all are. This is Hank's day. Don't do this to yourself. And it was good. Cole Bennett felt it work on the crowd. Felt 400 people begin just slightly to wonder, because Victor Hale sounded exactly like a decent man, watching another man come apart, and Cole Bennett sounded like a rich man, making wild accusations at a graveside, and could be the whole county's favorite words, could be Cole Bennett's finally cracked under all that grief and money. Victor Hale had done this 11 times. He was very, very good at it. Cowboy. And then Clara Whitmore stepped forward. She'd been standing at the front the whole time beside Cole in a dress Marta had lent her, and 400 people who'd heard there was a woman living up in Cole Bennett's old cabin got their first good look at her, and she stepped up to the grave, and she turned around, and she faced Victor Hale across 400 people, and she did not have a rifle, and she did not run, and she was not hiding. "My name is Clara Whitmore," she said. Her voice shook. She let it shake. She'd decided somewhere on the drive back from Prairie Creek that she would not pretend to be brave, because pretending to be brave was a suit, and she was done with people in suits. My husband was Daniel Whitmore, she said, and he died in the Sacred Heart Hospital in Billings on the 4th of June, and he could not hold a pen after the 9th of May, and I fed him with a spoon for 3 weeks, and that man—" She pointed, and her hand shook, and she did not lower it. "That man in the back with his hat over his heart has a deed that says, 'My husband sold him 400 acres on the 14th of May, signed in my husband's hand 5 days after my husband could no longer write his own name.'" Bauscholek. The churchyard did not make a sound. "He told all of you I was crazy," Clara Whitmore said. "He's been in your town for months telling everybody the poor Whitmore widow lost her mind, ran off, imagines things isn't safe to be alone. And I ran and I hid in a cabin on a mountain for 3 months because that's what he counts on, that a grieving woman with dirt under her nails will run and hide, and nobody will ever believe her over a man in a good coat." She took a breath. "And he was right," Clara Whitmore said. "For 3 months he was right. I was too scared to say one word because the last man who stood up to Victor Hale with proof was Tom Alder, and Tom Alder drove off a dry road 3 weeks before his hearing, and everybody said could be." June Alder in the 3rd row stood up. 71 years old, she stood up in that churchyard, and she said loud enough to carry, "I'm Tom Alder's widow, and every word she's saying is true, and I've been alone with it for 2 years, and I'm not alone anymore." And then, a man Cole Bennett didn't know stood up. "My name's Pete Merriweather," he said. "My father lost his land in Custer County in 1974, and they said he fell asleep at the wheel at 10 in the morning, and I've been carrying that for 8 years, and I drove 3 hours to be here because I heard Cole Bennett was going to say it out loud." And a woman stood up. "The Bow family were my neighbors," she said. "The father drowned in an irrigation ditch 18 inches deep. Everybody said the foreigners couldn't hack it. They were the finest farmers I ever knew, and I have been ashamed for 6 years that I let the county say that about them, and I'm not going to be ashamed anymore." One after another. In a churchyard, at a funeral, in the daylight, in front of 400 witnesses, the could-be's stood up one at a time and found each other and stopped being alone. And Victor Hale understood at last that he had lost. Cole Bennett watched it happen. Watched the exact moment the arrangement fell off Victor Hale's face, the gentle sorrow, the wounded patience, the whole careful mask of 11 years, and what was underneath came through for just a second before he caught it. And it was not evil exactly. It was calculation. It was a man doing arithmetic very fast and not liking the answer. It was a man who had spent 11 years keeping 11 crimes in 11 separate dark rooms, watching all 11 doors get thrown open at once in the sunlight, by people who would now forever talk to each other. Because that was the thing Victor Hale had never once had to face. Not proof. He'd beaten proof before. Proof could be forged and buried and driven off a road. What he could not beat was arithmetic. 11 separate accidents, each one a plausible could be, became the instant they stood next to each other in a churchyard one impossible coincidence. And there is no lawyer alive who can make a jury unsee 11 identical coincidences lined up along one creek like beads on a string. Victor Hale put his hat back on, and he left, quietly, without another word. And 400 people watched him go. And this time, nobody nodded to him. And that silence, as he walked out of that churchyard, was the sound of 11 years of could be finally becoming, did. It took Cole Bennett's money and his name and his 4 judges and his 2 newspapermen the better part of a year to finish what started in that churchyard, and Clara Whitmore's eyes to make it stick. Because the deeds alone weren't enough. They never had been. Victor Hale had good lawyers and a clean record, and 11 forged sales that each alone looked legitimate. What broke him was the water, and it was Clara Whitmore, surveyor's daughter, who put it in front of the judges in a way they could not unsee. She stood in a state hearing room in Helena with the county map her father had taught her to read, and she laid the 11 stolen parcels on it, and she traced the Prairie Creek drainage from Cole Bennett's North Range all the way down through 6 counties, and she said, "Your Honor's land can be argued about. A deed can be forged, and a signature can be disputed, and a sale can be explained. But water doesn't lie, and water doesn't take a bribe. And if you look at where every one of these 11 parcels sits, you will see that they are not scattered. They are strung along one creek in perfect order from the headwaters down, and every one of them carries a senior water right. And there is exactly one man who now holds all 11, and I would ask this court a single question." She looked at the judges. "Why would a land developer," Clara Whitmore said, "kill for 11 pieces of land and then let every one of them grow weeds?" There was no answer to that question, and everybody in that room knew it. And that was the day Victor Hale stopped being a respected businessman and became a defendant. The rest was slow, and it was ugly. And it was the way real justice actually comes, which is not in one dramatic moment, but in 100 small, dull ones. Depositions and filings, and forensic examinations of ink and paper. A hospital records clerk in Billings, who confirmed under oath that Daniel Whitmore was tube-fed and unconscious on the 14th of May. A handwriting expert who testified that Tom Alder's signature had been traced from a Christmas card, a young sheriff's deputy from Custer County who'd never believed the Merriweather verdict and had quietly kept the file for 8 years and now finally had somewhere to bring it. 11 could-be's. One pattern. And a pattern, it turned out, was the one thing Victor Hale's money could not make disappear, because you cannot bribe 11 counties at once, and you cannot drive 400 funeral goers off a dry road, and you cannot unsay the words that Pete Merriweather and June Alder and the Bowes' neighbor said out loud in a churchyard where everybody heard them. Boing. Victor Hale did not go quietly at the end, but he did not go the way he'd made 11 other people go either. He came to see Cole Bennett one last time in the fall uninvited, driving up the ranch road in the black car, and Cole met him in the yard the same way he had the first time, and this time Clara Whitmore stood on the porch and did not reach for a rifle because there was no longer any reason to. "You've cost me everything," Victor Hale said. "No," Cole Bennett said. "You cost yourself everything 11 times over. I just turned the lights on. You think you've won." Victor Hale's voice had lost the warmth entirely now. There was nothing left in it but the cold thing that had always been underneath. "You think this is justice. You have no idea what you've done, Bennett. There are men above me. Men you've never heard of. Men who wanted that water, and you've made an enemy of every one of them, and they do not forget, and they are more patient than I ever was." And Cole Bennett said, "Then I guess they'd better be careful about dry roads, because there's 400 people in this county now who know exactly what that means." Victor Hale looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked past him at the woman on the porch, the widow he'd tried to erase, the could-be who wouldn't disappear, and he said the last thing he ever said to either of them, and he said it almost with respect. "You should have stayed hidden," Victor Hale told Clara Whitmore. "You were safe when you were hidden. The moment you let yourself be seen, you became something I could take. That's how it's always worked. That's how it always works." And Clara Whitmore came down off that porch, and she walked right up to Victor Hale, closer than she'd ever willingly stood to any man with power in 2 years. And she looked up into his face, and she said, "No, you had it backwards the whole time. When I was hidden, I was alone. And alone is the only thing you know how to beat. The moment I let myself be seen, I stopped being one woman you could make disappear, and I became 100 people who'd notice if I did. You didn't lose because I stopped hiding, Mr. Hale. You lost because I stopped hiding, and somebody was standing next to me." They took Victor Hale into custody in November. The land came back, not all at once, and not without more years of paperwork, but it came back parcel by parcel to the families it had been stolen from. The Merriweathers got their ground in Custer County. The Bow children, grown, now got their father's 160 acres back, and the county newspaper printed a correction 8 years late, saying that the Bows had been the finest farmers Yellowstone County ever saw, and that everything anyone had said otherwise was a lie. June Alder got Tom's Creek bottom back and planted it at 72 out of pure spite, and it grew. And Clara Whitmore got her family's land back 4 generations. 400 acres. The deed with the chain of title running back to 1898, made legal and clean, and hers in a courthouse in front of a judge with Cole Bennett, sitting in the gallery not saying a word, because it was her moment, and he would not take 1 inch of it. She had her land back. She had her life back. She had for the first time in 2 years a future that belonged to her, and there was nothing keeping her on Cole Bennett's ranch anymore, which was why, on a clear cold morning in December, almost exactly a year after a woman had pointed a rifle at a rich man from the doorway of an abandoned cabin, Clara Whitmore came down the mountain to tell Cole Bennett she was leaving. She had it planned out the way she planned everything. She'd earned her wages. She'd won her case. Her own land was waiting 2 counties east, her family's ground the place she'd been running toward without knowing it for 2 years. She would thank him properly fully the way she'd never let herself thank anyone, and she would ride away, and she would build her own home with her own 2 hands, the way she'd rebuilt that cabin, and she would owe no one anything ever again. That was the plan. And it was a good plan, and it lasted right up until she rode into the yard and saw Cole Bennett standing by the truck and understood all at once that she did not want it. The classifier has fired again on this Western, but this is a fictional revenge drama, and its deaths are villain-orchestrated murders. Tom Alder, Hank Dooley, the bows, that the entire plot exists to expose and avenge. There's no first-person distress, no self-harm, nothing adjacent to a real person in crisis. This is a wrong response situation only if I break the story for a well-being probe that has no anchor. I'll set the notice aside and finish part 5. She did not want it, and it stopped her cold standing there in the yard with her whole careful plan going to pieces because Clara Whitmore had spent 2 years learning to want nothing she could lose, and here she was wanting something she could lose more than anything she'd ever owned. Cole Bennett looked up from the truck. "You're leaving," he said. It wasn't a question. She'd never told him. She hadn't told anyone. And he'd known anyway the way he always knew things from the maps and the silences and the shape of a person. "How do you do that?" Clara Whitmore said. "You've had your case a week and you haven't ridden your own land once," Cole Bennett said. "A person who won her home back and doesn't go stand on it isn't staying. She's working up the nerve to say goodbye." He set down what he was holding. "So, say it. I won't make it hard." And that was the thing. That was the thing that undid her right there in the yard. I won't make it hard. Because he wouldn't. She knew he wouldn't. He would stand there and let her go the way he'd let her do everything, the way he'd dropped his rifle in the snow, the way he hadn't taken the deed when she held it out, the way he'd handed her the right to save herself instead of keeping it for himself. Cole Bennett would let her ride down that road and out of his life, and he would not say one word to stop her, because he had decided a long time ago that he would never again take a single thing that wasn't freely given, and a woman was the biggest thing of all, and he would rather lose her than take her. And Clara Whitmore stood in that yard and understood that this was exactly why she couldn't leave. "Say something," she said. "You're the one leaving. Seems like it ought to be you." "Cole." Her voice was shaking. "For once in your life, take something. Ask me to stay. Just say it. Say don't go. You've spent a year handing me every choice like I'm made of glass, and I am so tired of choosing. I've been choosing alone for 2 years. Would you please just once?" And Cole Bennett said, "No."
Fuck you to see.
Clara Whitmore said, "No. No. And I'll tell you why, and then you can hate me for it." He came around the truck. "Because the first thing you ever said to me was, 'I have nowhere else to go.' Rifle in your hands, standing in a cabin, and that's the first thing out of your mouth, 'nowhere else to go.' And I have spent a year making sure that was never true again. That you always had somewhere else. That the door was always open behind you. That nothing I ever gave you was a cage." He stopped in front of her. "And now you've got somewhere else," Cole Bennett said. 400 acres, 2 counties east, free and clear in your own name. For the first time in 2 years, you have somewhere else to go. Clara and I am not going to stand here and ask you to stay. Because the day I ask you to stay is the day. Staying becomes something you did for me, instead of something you chose for yourself. And I've watched what happens to women who do things because a man asked. I've spent a year cleaning up after the last man who thought he could just take what he wanted from you. I am not going to be a gentler version of Victor Hale. Clara Whitmore said, That's not the same, that's not remotely. It's the same root, Cole Bennett said. It's a man deciding he knows what's best for a woman and arranging her life to get it. He did it with lawyers. I could do it with kindness. And kindness is worse, Clara, because you can't see the bars. His jaw worked. I never wanted to save you. I want you to hear that because I think you've been half waiting for me to try so you'd have a reason to run. I never wanted to save you. You saved yourself. You split wood in the cold for 3 months. You carried that deed against your skin. You stood up in a churchyard in front of 400 people and pointed at the man who ruined you and did not flinch. I didn't do any of that. I just wanted you to know somebody was standing beside you while you did. Clara Whitmore stood in that yard, and she was crying now, and she didn't care. That's the cruelest kind thing anybody's ever said to me, she said. It's not meant to be cruel. I know it's not, that's what makes it. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. The old gesture, the one from the cabin, from the wood splitting from before. Cole, you keep doing this. You keep handing me the choice and stepping back, and you think you're being good, and you are. You're being so good, but do you understand what it does? It means I never once get to find out if you'd fight for me. Everybody else fought for me and died. My father, my husband, and you. You just keep opening doors, and I never get to see you close one. And I need to know. She stopped. Cole, I need to know if I stay. Is it because there's nowhere else, or is it because there's you? And I can't know that if you won't tell me you want me to stay. I can't. I'm not brave enough. I used up all my brave in that churchyard. Cole Bennett looked at her for a long, long moment. And then he did the thing she had been waiting a year for. And he did it the only way he knew how, which was honest all the way to the bone. I want you to stay, Cole Bennett said. There, I said it. And I've been not saying it for months, and it hasn't been, because I'm noble Clara. That's the part I've been too proud to tell you. It's because I'm scared. My wife is buried 400 yards from that cabin, and I spent 11 years turning myself to stone, so I'd never have to feel that again. And then a woman pointed a rifle at me in the snow, and I felt the stone crack, and it has terrified me every day since. So I told myself I was giving you your freedom. And the truth is, I was protecting mine. I kept the door open behind you, so I'd have one open behind me too. I have been a coward, dressed up as a gentleman for a year. He took a breath. I want you to stay, he said again. Not because you've got nowhere else. You've got everywhere else now. I want you to stay because I have not felt like a living man since I buried Sarah, and I feel like one when you come down that mountain, and I would rather be scared and alive next to you than safe and stone without you. That's it. That's the whole thing. That's the most honest I know how to be. Clara Whitmore said, Then why did you say no when I asked? And Cole Bennett said, Because you asked me to ask you to stay. And I won't ask. Not because I don't want you to, God knows I do, but because staying has to be yours. Free and clear, like your land. I'll tell you I want it. I'll tell you every day. But I will never ask, because the day I ask is the day I've taken something, and Clara... His voice broke just slightly, the first crack she'd ever heard in it. I love you too much to take you. The yard was silent, and Clara Whitmore understood at last the whole of it, understood why he'd dropped the rifle, why he hadn't taken the deed, why he'd handed her every choice and stepped back 100 times over a year. It had never once been coldness, and it had never once been weakness. It was the single most generous thing a man with all the power in the world could do, which was refuse to use 1 ounce of it on the one person he wanted most. Cole Bennett had 4,000 acres and a name on the bank, and 4 judges who took his calls, and he had looked at the one thing he wanted more than any of it, and he had decided he would rather lose her than own her. And that, not the fighting, not the churchyard, not the water rights, not the justice, that was the thing that made Clara Whitmore stop running. "I have a condition," she said. Cole Bennett went very still. "All right. The same one I gave you the first day." Her voice was steadier now. "You remember, in the snow, I said when spring comes I leave you, don't own my future." "I remember every word of it." "I'm changing it," Clara Whitmore said. "New condition. When spring comes, she had to stop and start again. When spring comes, I stay, and you still don't own my future. And that's the whole point, Cole. I'm not staying because I have nowhere else. I'm staying because out of everywhere else in the world, this is where I'm choosing. My land keeps. 2 counties east, 400 acres. It'll be there in the spring, and it'll be there in 10 years, and it's mine, and it always will be, and I'm going to work it, and I'm going to build on it." "Clara." "But I'm going to do it from here," she said. "From this ranch, beside you. Because a person can have their own land and their own name and their own future and still choose to stand next to somebody. And that's the thing Victor Hale never understood, and it's the thing that beat him. He thought people were only strong alone or owned. He never once imagined somebody could be free and chosen at the same time." Cole Bennett said, "Say that last part again." "Free and chosen," Clara Whitmore said. "At the same time, both. I've never heard anybody put it that way." "That's because most people only ever get one," Clara Whitmore said. "My husband loved me, and I wasn't free, I was his. And it was gentle, but I was his. And these last 2 years, I was free, and nobody chose me, and free and alone is just another word for hunted." She looked up at him. "You're the first person who ever offered me both. You didn't even know you were doing it. You just kept opening doors and stepping back, and it drove me half out of my mind, and it turns out it was the only thing that could have saved me. So I'm staying. And you never asked me to, and that's why it's real." And Cole Bennett, the richest cowboy in the county, the man who'd turned himself to stone for 11 years, put his forehead down against hers and said nothing at all because there was nothing left to say. And for once in his life, he didn't try to. They didn't marry that winter. They didn't even court exactly, not in any way the county would have recognized. There was no announcement, no ring passed at the Grange, no talk. Clara Whitmore kept the cabin. That mattered to her, and Cole understood why, without being told. A woman who'd learned the hard way that the door has to stay open behind her needed to know she could still walk through it. So she kept the cabin, and she kept her land 2 counties east, and she kept her own name, and she came down the mountain every morning of her own free will, and that was the whole shape of it, and it suited them both better than any wedding could have. What they built instead was slower and stranger, and in the end, bigger than either of them had planned, because it turned out that 11 families getting their land back was not the end of the thing. It was the beginning of it. Joe. The stolen parcels came home one by one over 2 years, and every family that got theirs back had spent years being told they were crazy or careless or not up to the work. And every one of them arrived home carrying the same wound Clara had carried up that mountain, the wound of not being believed. And they found coming back that there was one place in Montana where being believed was the whole point. It started with June Alder, who was 72 and had a creek bottom she couldn't work alone, and Clara Whitmore rode 2 valleys over one spring morning and helped her put it in, and stayed 3 days and taught June's grandson to read the water off the ground the way her own father had taught her. And then it was the Merriweathers, and then it was the Bow children, grown and wary and half expecting to be cheated again, and Clara Whitmore stood on their 160 acres and read their water rights out loud to them off the county map, so they'd understand exactly what they owned and exactly why their father had died for it. And one of them, the daughter who'd been 9 when her father drowned in 18 inches of water, said, "Nobody ever explained it to us. 8 years, and nobody ever once explained what actually happened." And Clara Whitmore said, "That's the whole crime. That's how he did it. He counted on nobody explaining." Jump down. And somewhere in the middle of all that, the abandoned cabin on Cole Bennett's North Range, the one where his grandfather had lived 40 years, where his wife was buried 400 yards off, where a starving woman had lit a fire in November, and pointed a rifle at a rich man in the snow, stopped being a place of grief, and became something nobody had a name for at first. It became the place you went. If you were a widow in 6 counties who'd lost land and been told you imagined the theft, if you were a son carrying a father's accident for a decade, if you were anybody who'd been made small and alone and disbelieved by a man in a good coat and Victor Hale, it turned out had not been the only one. The pattern he'd run had been run by others in other counties, in other years, because the pattern worked. You heard eventually that there was a woman up on Cole Bennett's mountain who would look at your papers and read your ground and believe you, and would stand beside you while you learned to say it out loud. Clara Whitmore never charged a dime for it. She'd nailed the flour money to a tax shed once. She knew exactly what charity did to a person's spine. She called it surveying, and she called it neighboring, and she never once called it saving anybody, because she'd learned from the best that you do not save people. You stand beside them while they save themselves, and you keep the door open behind them, and you let them choose. Cole Bennett watched all of it, and did the thing he'd learned to do best, which was hold the light and stay out of the way. His money paid for the lawyers the families couldn't afford. His name opened the courthouse doors that stayed shut to poor people. His 4 judges took his calls, and then over the years, they started taking Clara's because a surveyor's daughter who could stand in a hearing room and make water tell the truth turned out to be worth more than all 4 judges put together. And the 2 of them, who had each spent years learning that the only safe thing to want was nothing, built a life out of wanting the one thing neither of them could lose by choosing it. Each other freely every single morning, with the door always open, and neither one ever walking through it. They married in the end. Of course they did 5 years on in the churchyard where Hank Dooley was buried, because Clara wanted him there for it, because Hank Dooley had left flour on a trail for a starving stranger, and paid for it with his life, and she would not be married anywhere he couldn't attend. 400 people came, the same 400 who'd stood in that yard and watched. 11 could bees become 1 did. June Alder cried. The bow daughter grown now, and running her father's 160 acres better than anyone in the county, stood up in the front row and would not sit down. And when the preacher asked if anyone objected, there was a silence, and then somebody in the back laughed, because everyone in that churchyard knew there was exactly 1 man in Montana who might have objected, and he was in a cell in Deer Lodge where he'd stay until he died, and where Clara had made certain of it. The water in his cup came out of a tap that no man owned, that no man could turn off, that belonged to everyone, and to no one, the way water was always supposed to. 10 years later, when people came to that cabin, and they still came long after the last stolen parcel was returned, long after Victor Hale was a story old-timers told, they'd ask Clara Whitmore the same question, always, some version of the same question. How did you do it? 1 woman alone against a man with all that money, and all those lawyers, and all those dead witnesses. How did 1 hidden woman in a cabin ever bring down Victor Hale and Clara Whitmore? Older now, her hands healed from the wood-splitting winters, her own 400 acres, green and worked 2 counties east, and her home right here on this mountain, would look at them and give them the truest answer she had. I didn't, she'd say. That's the whole thing. That's what you have to understand. A hidden woman alone in a cabin never brought down anybody, and if I'd stayed hidden, I'd be dead on a dry road, and Victor Hale would own every drop of water in 6 counties, and you'd never have heard my name. I didn't win because I was strong, and I didn't win because I was right. Being right got Tom Alder killed. Being right drowned Hank Dooley. She'd put her hand flat on the old cabin wall, the wall she'd rebuilt herself in a starving winter, the wall that had kept her alive. I won because I stopped hiding, she'd say. And the moment I stopped hiding, I wasn't alone anymore. That's it. That's the whole secret, and it's not a secret at all. Victor Hale spent his whole life making people small and alone one at a time in the dark, because a person alone in the dark can be made to believe they're crazy, can be made to disappear, can be made into could be. And the only thing on this earth that ever beat him was people standing next to each other in the daylight, where nobody could be disappeared, and nobody could be doubted, and could be finally became did. And that was the truth of it. And it was the truth Cole Bennett had understood before anyone standing in the snow with his rifle dropped at his feet, looking at a starving woman who'd said, "I have nowhere else to go." He'd spent 11 years believing that the greatest thing a man could own was land, and then money, and then a name so big that no one could touch it. He'd built all of it, and it had made him powerful, and it had made him lonely, and it had made him stone. And in the end, the greatest thing Cole Bennett ever owned was not the 4,000 acres, and it was not the name on the bank, and it was not even the water at the head of the Prairie Creek drainage that 11 families had died over. It was the trust of a woman who had every reason on earth never to trust another living soul, who had been failed by the world, and hunted by the powerful, and disbelieved by everyone, and who had looked at a rich man holding out an open hand over and over, refusing to take what he could have simply seized, and had finally freely of her own choosing put her hand in his. He never owned her. That was the point. That was always the point. He just stood beside her in the daylight with the door open behind them both, and that was the one thing no man could ever take, and the one thing worth more than all the land in Montana. And the reason a broken woman and a lonely cowboy turned an abandoned cabin into the most famous place in the state, not because someone was saved there, but because someone was finally at long last believed.